And in, oh, wonderful. Okay, here we are. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to History Matters. And so does coffee. Um, obviously, oh, there's the newbie mug. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the debate this morning. I don't know what I was thinking last week when I said, I wonder what we'll be talking about next Friday. I clearly just wasn't thinking because, of course, we're going to talk about the debates. Now, there's a lot to say. And I'm going to try and provide a lot of context and a way to think about what happened last night that will, if nothing else, let us take a step back and evaluate. But before I plunge into that, I turn to my partner in crime, Annie, who will explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. Great to be with you. I know we have a lot of teachers today in the chat, Joanne. Everybody's now officially on summer break. So lots of our teacher friends that normally have to watch through the archives have been tuning in and saying, hi, Clooney's here, Joanne's here, bunch of teachers, which is always great. So thank you for being with us. Joanne's going to talk for about 30 minutes about today's topic. And while she's discussing it, if you would put your questions into the Q&A, chat is great, but it goes way too fast. So I will look for those in about 30 minutes and I'll be back and we'll take all of your questions.
I cannot remember if this is the 223rd straight episode because I forget numbers in a nanosecond, but I believe this is the 223rd straight episode of History Matters. If you are here for the first time, say so in chat. You will get a robust welcome from the History Matters community that has really become a community in those 222 previous conversations we've had. Okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter here. Obviously, we all woke up and saw the general rending of garments by Democrats because of President Biden's poor performance during the debate last night. I emphasize the word performance because we're going to come back to that. What we're seeing a lot of is emotion. Even right after the debate, I was watching, I don't remember even what channel I was watching, and they were sort of panic. As we've said here countless times, if you're feeling a big roaring emotion in response to something you read and see politically, that is the moment to pause, take a breath, and consider why you're having that emotion and if that emotion makes sense, right? Is there someone pushing you in a direction for a reason? Don't let emotions run away with you. Keep things steady and evaluate your reactions. Okay, all of that said, we really need to talk about the debate last night. Now, I want to start by doing what we typically do here, is just briefly some context about presidential debates, because I think that's going to be really clarifying as to the nature of what we saw and the purpose of what we saw, which I'll be coming back to. Now, they were initially intended as a way to kind of get to know a candidate, right? And their performances of a sort, their theater of a sort, in a way, they're supposed to be a display of character, right? What a presidential candidate's character is, which you can't judge, not even necessarily watching a performance, but certainly not by reading something on a piece of paper or reading newspapers. We have these debates in part because of the former chairman of the FCC, Newton Minow. He was part of the establishment of the Commission on Presidential Debates. That was established in 1987. And it since 1988 until 2020, that was what organized these presidential debates. Here is the purpose of the Commission on Presidential Debates: to ensure that debates, as a permanent part of every general election, provide the best possible information to viewers and listeners. Its primary purpose is to sponsor and produce debates for the United States presidential and vice presidential candidates and to undertake research and educational activities relating to the debates. It was created as a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. The idea was that there really needed to be an organization of some sort, the Commission on Presidential Debates, that's only purpose was to sponsor presidential debates before elections. So as I said, nonpartisan, nonprofit. In 2022, the Republican National Committee announced that it would boycott the Commission on Presidential Debates. I don't know if you remember that, but that was, a giant step back, in part because of claims that it was biased. Those charges of bias came in part because Donald Trump wanted to structure the rules of the debate, and the commission would not allow that. And so instead, you had two candidates, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, organizing the debate with each other rather than the nonpartisan, nonprofit Commission on Presidential Debates. Okay. And I will say, I have a couple of, this morning, and I haven't done this before, but I think it's important. I have a couple of websites I'm going to direct you to as we have this conversation. One of them, the first one, I'll ask whoever is posting them in chat to post this. It's an interview with Newton Minow, organized and sponsored by the American Historical Association, that was focused on the historical context of presidential debates, why we have them, what they're supposed to do. Really interesting. Newton Minow died, I believe, last year. And so this is actually an opportunity to see him explain in person why he thinks these are important, what he did to help get this going, and what debates are supposed to do. So I really encourage you to find it and listen to it, watch it. And I hope it's up in chat right now. Okay. So to Minow, he believed that television was the best possible medium through which the electorate can have some kind of shared experience right before a presidential election. And that was the case more so in the past than it is at the present, in part because we have so many channels. It used to be that a show like Roots would be on TV, and then the next day everyone everywhere in your office would have been watching Roots, and you knew when you were watching it, everyone was watching it with you. We don't live in that world anymore. That said, obviously, a lot of us were watching this debate, so it was a kind of shared experience. The fact of the matter is, the jury is still out regarding the actual impact of debates. And here is the second link I'm going to ask Annie or Claire to post in chat. It's to an article by the Pew Research folks about an ongoing series of polls they took about how these debates did or didn't change people's minds over the years. So I encourage you to look at that too, to get a sense. And their conclusion, as you'll see, is not really clear what the impact is in a general kind of way of debates. Okay. Now, let's talk about some of the reality factors of the debate. I'm going to start with and of course I'm going to do this, folks, with a quote from John Adams that he wrote to his son, December 31st, 1795. John Adams has a pithy way of putting things. John Adams said, December 31st, 1795, "Cakes and sports to a people humiliated in their own esteem by corruption are, as to children, all they wish and all they want. Cakes and sports, performance, entertainment. People are watching it, are focused on it. It's what they seem to want. They're not looking necessarily beyond it, particularly if they're at a moment that really requires roots being grounded and really evaluating things. And we are in this moment. I don't know, are we a people humiliated? I'll let you discuss that in chat. But certainly we're at a moment where cakes and sports, entertainment and big stories would appeal to us and might be the only things that break through in the continuing swirl of politics that we're in the midst of right now. Okay. That said, let's think about, and I'm going to work my way categorically through three main points that I think we need to consider when evaluating the debates. There's a fourth main point. I've already discussed it. So I'm going to name them and then come back to them. So 4 general things to help us evaluate the debate: performance, which I've discussed, purpose, content, and framing. Okay, 3 things to think about it once we've gotten past the superficial performance level: purpose, content, and framing. Okay, purpose, I just began to address a moment ago when I talked about the creation of the Commission on Presidential Debates, right? The purpose: to get to know the candidates, to get to know their character, to get to know something about their character and their manner, right? That's something, some part of what these debates are supposed to do. But really, let's focus now on number 2, content. What was actually said? Because I think, and I have only had a brief moment to glance at press coverage, so I am predicting what we're going to see, and I somehow sadly think that this is precisely what we're going to see. I think a lot of what we're going to be seeing today is going to be a focus on President Biden's poor performance and not a focus on what was actually said, right? And what was said, it's almost ridiculous to have to say this. What was said matters, right? It does. That we're judging character, which based on what was said, we can do that more effectively. The content, what were the messages and facts or non-facts being sent to us, that's the main purpose of the debate, is for these 2 men to stand before us and show us what they stand for. So let's think about that content. And I'm not going to go into great detail into a list of the lies that former President Trump told. There's no other way to put it. Heather Cox Richardson's letter from an American this morning, and someone I'm sure among the wonderful History Matters community will be able to post it. This morning's letter begins to try and construct a list of the many, 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 many things that were just outright fantastical lies. And I've been very measured here in what I'm saying this morning, but that's a fact. The lies are a fact. So if you're thinking about what was said, and you need to get beyond the performance, right? Because Donald Trump was very loud and very sure of himself in saying things that were really blatantly untrue. Many of them, things that we saw with our own eyes, things he said that we heard, right? Just out and out lying and throwing it out there. So, and here's actually the third thing that I want folks to post is an article from The Atlantic that talks about what we saw last night in this realm of content. And you may have seen it mentioned already this morning. It's called the Gish Gallop, Gish Gallop. The idea and the article I want posted from The Atlantic is titled something like How to Beat Donald Trump in a Debate. And it talks about precisely what I'm going to be talking about here. The logic of the Gish Gallop, and I'm going to come in a moment to where that name comes from. The logic of it rests entirely on the fact that if you throw out enough nonsense, your opponent will not be able to refute it all and will be confronted with a mess of things that if they try to refute, they'll get caught up in the details. And if they ignore it, they'll look like they're walking away from a challenge, right? So the Gish Gallop, tossing out nonsense and lies quickly, loudly, in a stream, can be really effective in a debate because it makes it very hard to respond to. I believe this is from the Atlantic article that says, by the time you've begun preparing your rebuttal of the Gallopers' first lie, they've rattled off another dozen. They want to trick the audience into believing that the facts and the evidence are on their side. And this technique is based on delivery over depth. Some call it, quote, proof by verbosity. Okay. This comes from this idea, Gish. What is Gish or who is Gish? Comes from Dwayne Tolbert Gish. There was originally a Gish who not that long ago was a biochemist at the Institution for Creation Research. kind of a pseudoscientific organization that claims that all life on Earth was created in 6 days by the God of the Old Testament at some point in the past 10,000 years, and evolution had nothing to do with anything. Okay. Old argument. Anyway, that's what Gish believed. And here's what, according to what I read this morning, he would do in a debate. First, he would insist that his opponent go first. Again, this is all in the Atlantic article. Give credit where credit is due. And then after his opponent finished his or her argument, Gish would begin talking very quickly for a long stream of time with a long string of questionable facts. Now, I'm going to quote the Atlantic article again. Gish's debating opponent, of course, didn't have the chance even to note down all those facts, let alone work out whether or not they were correct. In his or her rebuttal, the opponent could either ignore Gish's tirade altogether, which would look like dodging the issue, or try to answer as many of the points as possible, which meant looking as if he or she were floundering. I'm going to ask folks to post in chat. I feel horrible. I don't have the name of the author who wrote How to Beat Trump in a Debate. If I had it, and I can't see chat right now, I would say it. But these are all ideas I'm pulling from this article, which is from February of 2023. The point here is that, the Gish Gallop is a method of avoiding talking about content in a useful way. It's a way of avoiding content. It's a performance method meant to hurt the performance of the opponent. So if you're talking about content, what we saw yesterday in part was a debating technique aimed at overriding any actual discussion of facts and content and concrete things. It was just aimed, and we heard it, right? A question would be asked, and Donald Trump would talk about whatever he wanted to talk about and ignore the question and throw out a stream of truthy facts that were not facts, or information, or make accusations or claims, right? And then at least once, the moderators tried to push him on an issue. The issue being, are you going to accept the results of the next election, which seems like a pretty fundamental issue. And he didn't really answer it. We can talk about that in chat if you want to, but that all by itself should be a major story. Okay, so content. Now I want to talk about framing. And that's what we're going to face today, and until the next major story comes along and flushes this out of our bloodstream and something else will come along. The framing is what we're going to be facing today and going on. And by that, I mean, we're going to be seeing the press and various commentators telling us what the debate means, what happened during the debate, not in a detached kind of a way. Let us describe what happened, but in an attempt to really sort of, here is the overall meaning mode of framing, right? And as I was mentioned earlier, watching what the press was saying about the debate after it ended, some of the framing, certainly on the part of Democrats or people who lean to the left, disaster, panic, and we're seeing it all over the place, right? Change candidates. Okay. So that's going to be the framing we're going to see. We're already seeing it. It started last night. Panic. The election, Biden did not perform as we wanted him to, or as Democrats wanted him to. And now we're going to panic about this. And it was a disaster, and it's horrible. And now we need to eliminate him as a candidate. That's framing. That's not fact. That's framing. That's people telling you how they are interpreting what we watched yesterday, right? What happened yesterday was that a presidential candidate stood before the American people and lied to them for a straight 90 minutes. Interesting that so far, as far as I know, that's not the story. The story is President Biden didn't perform well. Panic, panic, panic. That's framing. At least, if not more important, is the fact that Donald Trump just stood there in front of the American public and boldly said a number of things that were really, really, really untrue with nary a glance back. That should be a big part of the framing too, right? If you want to talk about what happened, President Biden did not perform well. Former President Trump lied a lot. And an example of this, normally, I'm very careful here about not rushing into the abyss of partisan politics. But when I say lies, I'm saying lies because that's a fact. There is, where did I see it this morning? Well, I guess I would point you again to Heather Cox Richardson's letters from an American this morning, in which she begins to list just out and out lies. Nothing subtle here, but just out and out lies. Read them and decide what you think for yourself. Okay, so here's what I want to say, and then I want to pause so that we can open things up for our conversation. Things to think about at this moment. Number one, realize that now we're going to watch a variety of pundits and reporters frame the debate for us. Tell us, they're going to be telling us what they think it means. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's also not necessarily fact. It's an opinion. You need to think for yourself about what you saw, about how you want to evaluate it. Think before absorbing whole whatever it is that we're going to read today in the press and tomorrow and the next day. Take a step back. As I've said so many times here, don't get carried away with the emotions of the moment. Don't let the emotions of the moment cloud the fact that you need to decide what you saw. You need to decide what's important about it. You need to think about the content of the debate last night. You need to think about the facts or non-facts, lies that were said during the debate. You ultimately need to decide what you think. Realize that whatever you read today, unless it's a list of here are the facts, here are the things that Donald Trump said that aren't true, here are the things that President Biden said that, this is what I was going to say before. The Associated Press, very disappointed in what I saw this morning. They posted an article this morning, and I don't have a link to it, in which it was something like the lies and misinformation of both candidates, right? Ultimate both sidesing. We're going to talk about the lies and misinformation of both candidates. And I thought, okay, I watched that debate. Lies of both candidates? Okay, I'm going to read the story. So I encourage you to go find and read the story for yourself, because if you do, the second or third paragraph says, Biden doesn't really lie. He exaggerates. Okay. Already, the headline is wrong, right? And then there's a list of things that were lies. You're reading, and again, very clear, very straightforward, Trump, Trump, Trump. And then we get to Biden. He got the price of insulin wrong. So we have denying fundamental factors about the January 6th, claiming that Nancy Pelosi took full responsibility for it, any number of other wacky things that were said during that debate. And what they have on Biden is he got the cost of insulin wrong. So I encourage you to go find that and read it. And that's a great example of the framing that I'm talking about here. The headline is the ultimate both sidesing. Let's look at the lies of both sides. It's not what the content of the article says. And it would be very easy to read that, and as I'm talking about here, get carried away with the implications of it and the emotion of it. And as many people probably won't go and read the article, assume that that's true. And I will already say that on one social media platform, there are already people saying, Biden lied through the entire thing. I'm not going to address that. But my ultimate point here is you need to think about what you saw and what you heard. You need to acknowledge that things are being framed for you by people who have a purpose or a goal, and maybe the purpose or goal is ratings or readership, whatever it is. There will be many people telling you how to evaluate that debate. And in some cases, it will be informing people as they think things happened. In some cases, they won't be. Pause before you get swept up in this moment, because it's 10:29 a.m. I had about 5 minutes to open social media and close it because I could already see what was there. Panic. Please don't get swept up in the panic. Think for yourself. Don't just swallow the framing, because ultimately, debates don't decide elections. We do. What we think matters, what we see matters. We matter. So don't go running around in a panic, the rending of garments, because this is it. It's all over. We need to totally change everything. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My father used to say, when in trouble, when in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. We should not be running in circles and screaming and shouting right now. We should be pausing, considering what we saw, thinking about the content of that debate, and realizing debates don't decide elections. We do. Okay, 1 minute over, but I actually did it all. Okay, now, for those of us who are here for the first time, every week for 220 whatever weeks,
Two, two.
This is two?
Carolee corrected us. It's 222.
222. Okay,
Yep,
so this is
yep,
the 222nd episode.
Yep.
Every week, for all of those weeks, I have a mug that in some way relates to the topic at hand. That's been really challenging sometimes, but I've done it. I don't have 222 mugs. In this case, I will acknowledge, and some of you probably noticed it, I picked up the cup and took a big sip from it before when I was in front of the camera. And I was like, I just revealed the mug. Some of you may have seen this. I hope not. I just thank you. Okay, if Annie didn't, maybe you didn't. At any rate, I tried not to express on my face my panic at the fact that I destroyed the reveal before we'd even started. Okay. So I've used this one before. It seems apt for today. I actually went to my cupboard with the mugs, and I was like going, lies, lies, lies. But what I came up with was framing. This is from the short-lived Hamilton exhibition based on a musical that was in Chicago that I was a historical consultant on. What it says is, who lives, who dies, who tells your story?
That's my favorite part of the whole show.
Right, because it's about history. It's about how we tell the story of our time. What we're talking about this morning is the telling of the story of the debate. And we need to think about our view of that story. Who tells the story and what story they tell matters. Realize that you will be seeing a lot of narratives being constructed by people about what they think this means. You get to decide for yourself. So who lives, who dies, who tells your story? You have an impact on what that story is and how you understand it and how you act on it. Okay. Now I will open chat and stop talking.
All right. Well, we've got some questions, so take a big sip there. All right. Our friend Sydney and her boyfriend watched the debate, and her boyfriend had some interesting comments that she shared in the chat with us.
And Sydney, for those who are new here, is a college student.
Yes. And I got to meet her in person in Atlanta week before last, and we hung out, and she's delightful, y'all. Okay, Sydney's question is, what does the debate say about where we are as a country? What can we expect for future debates?
Oh, future debates, I can't predict. As I've said, I did not say this word in the last half hour. Contingency, right? My favorite word. I did not say it. What we're experiencing in this moment is so not precedented in many ways. And as a historian saying it's not precedented, I don't say that lightly. We're in such a weird moment. We have some people who have just fundamentally stepped away from democracy. We don't, and they are people with power, and there are all kinds of extreme claims and desires. I still haven't talked about Project 25, and I will, but I need to read the whole thing before I can comment on it. But at any rate, this is a moment of such extreme contingency where we can't predict what's to come because what is happening, right? This is a distinctive kind of political moment. So I can't predict in debates to come. The first half of the question was what?
What does the debate say about where we are as a country?
Well, I mean, sadly, it says a lot about where we are as a country, right? We certain, and I'm going to say this and then define it. I think saying we're deeply polarized is a big problem because it's a both sides way of looking at this moment. When one side is, deliberately stoking chaos in one way or another. So I don't think you can both sides what we're seeing now, but it certainly shows the depth of divisions, however you define those divisions. And the simple fact that what we watched, so much of it, was just not truth. I mean, just lies. Think about, I don't know, 20 years ago, if you watched a debate and a candidate stood up and said that sort of stuff. And remember, in a sense, how shocked you would have been in the past if you had seen that particular performance. So the fact that we saw for 90 minutes and heard for 90 minutes that kind of, rush of misinformation and lying, that it wasn't checked in real time, that it just was there, going to the nation. That in and of itself says that this is a distinctive, weighty political moment. That's where we are. When that has been normalized. So we're at a point where a lot of things are being normalized that should never be normalized. I'm not saying that this is the first time in American history that presidential candidates have lied. I'm definitely not saying that. But the fact that we have a candidate who is this centered on it, unapologetically doing so before the public and not really being checked at all in real time, and we all stood and watched it as though it was normal. I mean, that could be another story people could talk about today too. What we saw is last night is not normal, right? It's not typical. There are many things that were distinctive about it. That would be good, right? If somebody went and looked at past debates and tried to find past debates that in some way or another echo some of what we saw here. So that's part of what I would say. Yeah, I know. Someone just said, Cece just said, chat is flying. I realize it is. This is I realize, we are all feeling emotional this morning. I'm feeling emotional this morning, right? I opened up briefly some social media platform and it was all kinds of people saying, in one way or another, right? I don't like this. I feel bad. It's like, okay, I understand that. But really, I think we at History Matters know that that's not the place to go. Like, it's understandable if you have those feelings, and then you got to pause and think about what happened and evaluate what you think about it.
All right. Dave, our good buddy Dave, says, with regard to framing and the former president lying for 90 minutes, has the press failed the American experiment in democracy? When the press fails to report facts and instead of just their own opinions, it seems the press is aiding and abetting the demise of democracy. And he wanted to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm not going to sit here and say this is all the fault of the press. I don't think that's fair. I do think that our press, and in some ways we too, but I'll start with the press, that the press generally has never had to deal with the rise of authoritarianism in the way that it's happening now. Our press has been, very focused on both sides. I mean, the original Commission on Presidential Debates. Really, that was both sides. Like each side gets to have its say. That'll be fair. That is how democracy works, right? Fair time. Like if one party has X amount of airtime, the other party deserves X amount of airtime. Fair play is part of the democratic process. That's part of how things are supposed to go. So, in this moment, in the moment that we're in, that I've lost track of where I was going, guys, but that's not what was happening. Repeat the question to me, Annie.
You wanted to say with regard to framing, has the press failed the American experiment?
Right. Thank you. So yeah, as I said, I don't want to just blame the press and say they failed us. I think that the press and we ourselves are not equipped for this moment. It's a moment that really requires everyone to pause for a minute and think about what we're seeing and not frame it in a normal politics frame. I said this somewhere online yesterday. I've said it a million times in recent years. I think Americans so profoundly believe in American exceptionalism, so profoundly believe that we'll always be okay, that bad things like we've seen in other places don't happen here, that they even now can't see what's happening all around them and thus aren't focused on commenting on and pointing to things that need to be all of those things. I think American exceptionalism creates blinders so that things that are crises, that are real crises, don't seem like crises. Well, it'll be okay. Of course, it'll be okay. Some people comment on my last book, right, which is about physical violence in the U.S. Congress and how Southerners were using threats and violence to silence people who oppose slavery. Some people take as that the message of that book, see, it's been really bad before. We'll be fine. That's not my intended message with the book, right? The book talks about a really bad moment after which came a civil war. It's not saying that's how things should work. It really isn't. So American exceptionalism, in part, is a big problem. The other thing I said last night, and I'll say again and again, in part because I don't want to simply point to the press, it's bigger than that, and we need to acknowledge that, is that a lot of Americans fundamentally don't know what democracy is. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it gives them. They don't know what they lose if and when it goes away. We did an episode. Someone could find which episode it is. I did an episode here on History Matters that was titled something like What You Lose When You Lose Democracy, which was an attempt to address this very question. People really don't understand what democracy is and does. They don't understand the sense that, it's a way of us all coming together under a constitutional pact and engaging in a fair process of politics that has free and fair contests, elections in which public opinion emerges with a winner, right? People don't have that understanding, and all the things I've talked about over the years here. They don't understand that, things that are important in democracy, accountability, that you have to have accountability for the people you give power to. We give power to people. They're accountable for how they spend it, that power to us. That free and fair elections are another huge part of a democratic politics, right? Again, I should write about this, is what I should do. And I know others have. But I think I think those two things, American exceptionalism and the fact that, and this, it feels entirely goofy for me to say Americans don't know what democracy is, but I think that's fundamentally true. I think we've taken it for granted to such an extreme degree. We never had to think about what it was. We never had to acknowledge that it was fragile. We never had to imagine that it could go away. And so it was a cloud of satisfaction with the way things were. Look at us. We're America. We're special. Everything's good. Everything will always be good because democracy in America. That's a chain of logic that is comfortable to believe. And we are in a moment that really, really is asking us to think about the reality of that and to not blithely swim along in the current that we're in without, again, pausing to think about what democracy fundamentally is, what it does, how it works, and what chips away at it.
Whew, that was a lot.
I know, I'm sorry.
That's no, I'm trying to process it and pay attention to the chat. So and this just brings up, there was a comment in the chat or in the Q&A. Susan wanted to applaud you for the way that you kept the Twitter conversation going during the debate. So she sent kudos on that, as did others. Okay, we have our friend Gloria's here with us, and welcome back, Gloria. We hadn't seen you in a little bit. So Gloria was wondering, she was challenging what were the lies that Trump told, and did the stream of insults from Joe Biden, if you could comment on that. She felt like we're not giving equal time. She's saying that President Biden did a stream of insults, and how does that all fit into it?
I will start by saying, yes, there were a couple of moments when President Biden insulted Trump back. That did not make me happy. That's not a stellar moment. And yes, that happened. I wish I had in front of me the list of lies. The fact that I wish I had Heather's letter in front of me.
There's so many people that really, if you just Google like fact check the debate, there are 500 articles this morning. I was looking myself. So I think we've got 3 people actively putting links in. Like when you were saying that you were going to have us look at links this morning, Jim was on it, Tim was on it. It was like we had all these fact checkers and
okay, thank you, Carolee, for posting this. Okay, here are some of the lies. Trump said that some Democratic states allow people to execute babies after they're born, and that every legal scholar wanted Roe v. Wade overturned. No. He said that the deficit is at its highest level ever, and that the United States trade deficit is at its highest ever. Those are things that happened during Trump's administration. He said there were no terrorist attacks during his presidency. Wrong. He said that Biden wants to quadruple people's taxes. No. He lied that his tax cuts paid for themselves. In fact, they added trillions of dollars to the national debt. This goes on and on. I'm not going to continue reading it. I encourage you to go find it and just, again, read it for yourself, right? Heather says what she thinks. She has footnotes, as ever. She's a good historian. She lists these lies. If you think about some of the things that I just said, that Democrats want to execute babies after they're born, there's some things that really, they're just lies, or that I'm going to stop. But I encourage you to read the letter, even just read the part that lists some of the lies that Trump had during the debate. But yes, Gloria, I don't think that the insults that Biden offered were good or helpful. But I also don't think that that's on the same caliber of offense as what we saw coming from Donald Trump.
All right. Our good friend Linda asks, please address the historical precedent for elections in which presidents are challenged from within their own party. There are many Democratic naysayers ready to throw Biden under the bus. Are they hurting his chances of winning by doing so? I think there was a Now and Then episode about this, but she said she couldn't find it.
Say that one more time for me.
She wanted to know the historical precedent for elections where presidents are being challenged from within their own party. I think she means like sitting presidents.
Right. Well, I mean, certainly, political parties aren't and haven't been uniform boxes of, all support staying together. Particularly speaking as a historian, look at the 19th century. That like parties came and went, they split, they divided, they vanished, they came back. This is another one of those things that we just assume because in our lifetime and a long time before our lifetime, we've had 2 parties, right? America is centered on a 2-party system. It sure wasn't always. So first of all, we have to not assume that 2 uniform blocks banging against each other is the way politics work. I've also spoken before, and I think we had an episode on political parties when political parties die or something like that, in which I talked about the fact that the Republican Party, this will be a broad claim, you might not agree with me. I don't think the Republican Party actually really exists at this point, because I don't think that what we're seeing is a party by a real definition of the word. People coming together with policies, again, a Democratic Party, small d, working within the system to get things done. What we're seeing now is something different, and it's centered on one person. And I don't know if I would call that a political party. That would be an interesting discussion to have. But so what we're seeing now, yes, it is a part of a party turning against itself. And you could say that too. They're Democrats who also are sort of in a different box from the other Democrats. I don't think, speaking very generally, that that's necessarily unhealthy, because I think tolerating clashing viewpoints is an enormous part of what a democracy should do. I do think that when an extreme point of view grabs control in a way that doesn't necessarily reflect the majority, that's, again, a moment to step back and think about what's happening. It's important to structurally think about what's happening with party politics. And there have been moments when parts of one party have turned against another. And that's part of why in the 19th century, parties just divided, the good old Whig Party and ended. The Whig Party was partly over the issue of slavery. So this isn't new. It's happening now in part, though, with extremism. And in some cases, extremism that really fundamentally is not small d democratic in its adherence, in its heart and soul. And that really matters profoundly.
So Emma Guest, I don't know if Guest is your last name, Emma, or if it's Emma and you're a guest, because I think this might be your first time putting a question in the Q&A. I don't recall your name. So if you're new to us, welcome. And we have a lot of new people today, Joanne. I was so excited. Okay, so Emma's asking, so how do we counter all the talking heads who are framing things so badly?
How do we counter them? Well, we're sitting at home and they're, how do we counter these people in the press who will have very loud ways of trumpeting what they're saying? Again, I think not only evaluating for yourself and not getting swept up in the emotion, but also doing what we do here at History Matters with friends and family, actually talking about what happened, encouraging people to not go on emotion, but actually talk about what happened. Highly democratic, small d, that's one way to operate. I don't think there's a instant solution of how to combat what we're about to see until something else sweeps it along. I'm guessing presidential immunity will just sweep this out of public view when the Supreme Court decides to announce a decision on that, which should be happening really soon, as a matter of fact. So, to counter it, I would just say, be aware of what it is. Don't just absorb. It's really easy to absorb what people are shouting at you. I mean, even I woke up this morning and I was like, oops. And then I thought, no, because what I really wanted to do this morning and what I've been attempting to do this morning is to say that that's really not useful and that's not helpful. And I said in a variety of ways, again, all over social media, we need to talk. And what I meant by that is we really do, to really talk in a calm way, in a cogent way, in a way grounded on facts about what we saw and about what it means. And that will not be, going back to the question, what we will necessarily be seeing. And all I can say is think about what was said, evaluate what was said, and have that in your mind as you're hearing input from others. This is going to sound unrelated, but it's a historian comment. When I begin a big project, a historical project, I sort of inform myself in a very vague way about what scholarship says, so I have a sense of the framing of the argument, and I don't plunge into detail. Why? Because I want to look at the evidence myself, and I want to see what it says to me. And I don't want somebody else to be telling me how to interpret it. Once I bury myself in the evidence and I see what it's saying and I have a gut feeling for what I'm seeing, then I step back and I look at all of the commentary and what historians have said, because then I can evaluate it. And I can say to myself, wow, given what I just saw, that makes no sense. May sound really logical, may be prominent argument among historians, I don't think it's useful because I found all kinds of things that suggest something fundamentally different. That's how you get new ways of thinking about things. And that's how you advance the historical argument. And in a sense, that's kind of a version of what I'm saying now is, um, evaluate and think about what you're seeing rather than swallowing other people framing it for you. And I know this is like a cliche, come to your own conclusions. I keep repeating it because it's going to be very hard to do with the howling that's going to be taking place in the press and on social media and on TV and everywhere else. Just be aware of the fact that it is not necessarily calm and cogent analysis, but it's going to be bound up in horse race electoral energy and saying things to get eyeballs and readers and all of the things that happen just generally in any form of media. We need to back to frame what we're going to see with all of the realities in our mind as well, so that we can evaluate. Democracies generally rely on the fact that the American people can think and evaluate what's happening in politics, what's happening in the nation. That's why, in general, the founding generation was so focused on education. You got to be educated. You have to understand how things work before you can draw conclusions. I do want to say, and I have not been focused on the chat. I just see what Annie just said. Please, folks, if there's anywhere where we should be civil and kind to each other, it's in this community. And it's ever been the case that we do not always agree here. We have people here with different points of view, and that's a glory of what we do here, right? That's a big part of the success of what we have here, is that people can have different viewpoints and they can disagree, and we don't jump on people. And in a way, that's what I'm saying this morning, right? Rather than emotionally respond, we can talk to each other, particularly here in all the weeks that we've been together. So please don't resort to name calling or, whatever it is. That's not who we are. We are a prime example, and we're almost out of time, and I usually say this at the end. This History Matters community is a prime example of how things should work within a democratic politics, that people come together, they ask questions, they debate things, they question things, they refute things, they don't agree, they really don't agree, right? And we can do this regularly, routinely, in a civil way, to help us all confront the moment that we're in and evaluate it for ourselves. I see Cece says fair, but when people support lies, it isn't okay. It isn't. But again, if someone supports a lie, do you howl at that person? Liar! Okay, where's that going to go? Or do you say, you know what? The facts don't say that. In my opinion, here are the facts. So in part, I'm talking about the manner. I'm not saying we have to agree. And I am saying, certainly out in the world, there will be people just lying. And that's not good. Whoever does it, that's not good. But a way to respond to that is not to cast people out. It's to evaluate what they're saying and come back with a different way of seeing it. You might or might not convince that person. We all know that. But howling and swatting at people accomplishes nothing. And particularly in this community, I just encourage us to remember that we're a community.
We have 12 more questions. This might be a new record. I don't know if Claire has a way for AI to quickly add up every time I don't know if they keep all the old questions. I don't remember ever having that's 18 questions total. That's got to be close to a new record, if not a record.
Well, let's keep going a little bit. We'll see. I'll say to folks that are new here, normally around now, we would be stopping and going to the after party. And for those who don't know what that is, what we would normally do at this point is stop recording what's going on here so we can be even freer and easier in what we're saying. But given how much there is to say about the topic and how strongly people have feelings about it, rather than segueing into the after party, I think we'll take a few more questions and then we'll go to the after party. So if you stick around, you will experience the after party, which is just a real community moment. It's a wonderful thing. But anyway, okay,
Okay.
I will stop.
So James Dennis asks, isn't it fair to say the US democracy is also counterintuitive because of the way it relies on gridlock to preserve our freedoms by restraining the government from changing?
I don't think democracy relies on gridlock. Is that what it just said? The question?
Yeah, he's asking, it relies on gridlock to preserve our freedom by restraining the government from changing.
Oh, well, it is true that part of what the Constitution does, it allows for change, right? There's an amendment process, but it doesn't make that change necessarily super easy, which is how it should be in the case of a constitution, which is not normal legislation. It's a set apart, right? It needs to be. I've talked about this before too, that one of the things that the founding generation worried about was, would the American people understand that a constitution is a different kind of document, and that a constitution isn't just a law and it can't just be changed. It can be changed, but that it has heft. It has a kind of gravitas. It's kind of is above the general hum of politics. So I once again, I'm so emotional about this, guys, that I keep forgetting the question. Repeat the question for me again, Annie.
Said, isn't it fair to say that US democracy is counterintuitive because of the way it relies on gridlock to preserve our freedoms by restraining the government from changing?
Okay, so yeah, so in some ways the government's not supposed to change willy-nilly. That is absolutely true. But gridlock and debate and compromise are not the same thing. We live in an age of gridlock, right? We watch, nothing happen very often in Congress. Debate and compromise, this is the most cliched thing in the world. That's what our political system is grounded on. That's what we're supposed to be doing. So yes, it isn't super easy to change the system, but as far as constitutionally you can, and as far as the brass tacks of what happens in Congress, that's easier to change. Not easy, again, shouldn't be easy, but easier to change. That's why at the beginning of every House, what do I want to call it? Not session, each term, thank you. At the beginning of each term, each congressional term, right, the House talks about and devises its rules. Again, that's a moment of change. It's there. And I think in a spirit of fairness, change should not be super easy, because that could happen for all kinds of reasons. And there could be someone who in bad faith makes a change. That should not be easy either. So I understand the question, but I also feel the need to say that measured change is a good thing.
All right, that was a good question, James. Ellen, I think this kind of in a way relates back to Sydney's earlier question about the future. Like, I think she asked you a question earlier about predicting future debates. I think Ellen kind of hits on that with this question. She asked if you think the future debates will continue to have the microphone off if it's not your turn to speak rule. With the lack of civility and constant interruptions, she's thinking this might be a good idea moving forward. I'm wondering if, like Sydney asked about the future, is this now going to be, and also then the no audience thing. I thought that was it felt weird, because I understand why they did it, but it just felt weird.
It was weird because it was a debate. It was a debate in front of nobody. So it did feel weird. On the other hand, is it useful to have one of them say something and have the crowd erupt into hooray or boo? I don't know if that's useful. So it's not what we're used to seeing. But I wouldn't necessarily say it shouldn't happen again. Again, I think, as ever, our response to what we saw yesterday should be to evaluate what we should or shouldn't do again. Should we do the turning off the mic thing again? I don't know. That certainly seemed like a way to avoid some of the chaos of recent debates. I think that's good. I think that is a separate matter from what you do as a debate strategy when someone uses their time before the mic goes off to just throw a lot of stuff out there. How do you respond? That's a big question. That's what I would say. You know, if you're the Democratic Party right now, they need to evaluate that good old Gish Gallop, right? Given that that's what's happening, as far as a debate strategy, the Democrats need to evaluate how you deal with that. What do you do with that? And that's different from should the mics be on and off. And it might be the same and it might be different. I mean, as soon as, you know, we stepped away from the Commission on Presidential Debates, we moved into a let's reorganize and reshape everything zone. And sometimes that could be good and sometimes that can be not so good.
All right. We're down to 9 questions.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Okay, Frieda. Oh, and also Emma, I want to correct myself when I said I thought Emma Guest, was that her last name or
Oh
was
no.
that's our New York tour guide. That's your New York tour guide friend. I didn't make the connection, so I apologize to Emma. But I told her from now on, her new name at History Matters is just Emma, the New York City tour guide.
Emma, the New York City
How
tour
we
guide.
know her, and that's how I will always identify her now.
I do want to touch on something I'm seeing in chat, which I think is a good point. As far as fact checking. I think it would be very interesting, and I have no idea how to implement this, but it's certainly really worth considering some way to have fact checking as on all sides, on both sides, right? Are you wanting to talk, Annie?
I have an idea for that.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so this group of museums that the Smithsonian works with they have this thing called the Civic Season between Juneteenth and July 4th, trying to get Gen Z kids to go out to museums and explore history. And they have design fellows, Gen Z design fellows. I think we should have 4 or 5 Gen Z fact checkers with their laptops right there on the side of the stage, opposite of the moderators, fact checking the heck, and then putting it up on the screen right there in front of the candidates so that we know in real time, you know, if 3 out of 5 are able to verify that that is not correct, we should see it on the screen. I think that would add a layer. It'd be harder for them to lie. That's just my thought. And the Gen Z folks know how to navigate the internet and how to, you know, anyway, that's just my.
I certainly think it's an interesting idea would be to have a panel of people, and including a Gen Z person would be good. A panel of different kinds of people with different kinds of expertise, evaluating what's being said. Now, of course, what might happen is there's just now a new cloud of conflicting things to think about. So I don't know what the answer is, but I do think, to me, one of the lessons of what we just watched is that fact checking needs to be incorporated in some way. And it can't just be a host saying, that's not what's true, that's not what's true. Because, you know, if the person can respond by saying, yes, it is, and that's not going to get us anywhere. But I don't know the answer to this. We're like, let's do another question or two. Some people are saying in chat, we need to go to the after party, and I want to allow for that too.
Brenda asks that she gets the historian's perspective, but the story is being told one way that we can't take back. How can we change this?
Repeat that again.
Says she gets the historian perspective, but the story is being told one way and we can't take that back. How can we change this?
I don't think the story is being told one way, though. There's one really loud way, that's for sure, about how the story is being told. Again, I think not running down the paths, running in circles, screaming and shouting, as my father would say. I think not getting swept up in that. We can't control what the media is going to say. We can respond to how people are telling the story. We can respond by saying, I think that's exaggerated. I don't think that's true. You know, I say this a lot, and I know it sounds, I don't know, Pollyannish, but there have been a good number of times when the public speaks up in a united way, not one big group, but a bunch of people come together and have a strong opinion about something, and it has an impact. Right now, I don't know, for example, all of the mechanics and politics behind the New York Public Library just being given more funding when the funding was dramatically cut, but there was sure a lot of public fuss and anger about funds being cut for the New York Public Library, and then bing, it went back in. So I can't say one led to the other, but I can say people speaking up and saying that's not right, that's not fair, that matters. That really matters more than you might think. You might really think to yourself, I'm one person, what does it matter what I'm saying? When a lot of people say something similar together, whether we believe it or not, our government is still grounded on public opinion. Whether people want that to be true or not, at the moment, public opinion governs in a democratic government. I've written about that. I've spoken about that. We really matter and we have to fundamentally believe that, even if we don't necessarily feel that we have the strength to believe that.
All right. Do you want to try one more?
One more, and then we'll go to the after party.
Okay. So Robert Hurst, I think, is the last question. Said CNN briefed viewers on the rules, but not on whose rules were put in place. Maybe the issue is no one agrees what a debate is anymore. Outside of high school debate clubs, is there any segment that teaches the particulars of debate? Maybe that's what we're lacking.
Well, I on the one hand, I want to say, yeah, it would be useful to sort of have some kind of moment where well, actually, maybe it wouldn't be. I'm going to take that back. There are different ways in which debate is, there's Robert's Rules of Order and other sort of ways in which we govern how we deal with each other in groups. I think nothing should be adopted without people conferring with each other and agreeing on the format. And you're right, CNN sort of said what the rules are. As long as the rules are set and everyone's clear on them, that's fair. But again, I think as with everything else here, we need to evaluate how things are happening and how we're doing them and what rules apply and if they need to change. Okay, the chat is like, after party. Okay, so here's what I'm going to have a slightly shorter version of the segue to the after party. As I said a little while ago, what's going to happen now is that we're going to stop recording our conversation so we can be freer and easier in whatever we want to say in this community, in a civil community kind of way. If you beamed in through NCHE, stay right where you are and poof, you will be in the after party. If you are watching us on Facebook, you need to leave Facebook and go to ncheteach.org/conversations. That's ncheteach.org/conversations. And then you too, poof, will be in the after party. I already gave my ode to democracy a little earlier, so I'm going to condense it so we have some time to talk. I will just say, we are an example here of why democracy is important. And when we move into a direction that feels as though it's getting offensive, we self-regulate. Democracy is about, again, debating and compromising. We can disagree. We can fundamentally disagree. We can disagree to the point that we want to act against ideas that we feel are fundamentally dangerous and come together and do that. And that's all included in the process of democracy. So when we come here and have a debate and don't always agree, which I like, we are showing what a democratic community can be. So as ever, I thank you all for coming here and proving that this is possible. I hope that other people can have some version of this so people come together and actually evaluate what they're seeing and hearing. And I thank Annie and Claire and Jessica and John and NCHE for making this possible for 222 weeks. For those of you who are not going to stick around for the after party, I will see you in a week. And now I can truly say I have no idea. It could be a Supreme Court decision we'll be talking about next week. I don't know. But at any rate, thank you all for coming. Those of you who are new, thank you for coming. I hope you'll come back, because the more people we have here and the more we can engage with each other and different opinions, the better this is. Okay. Now we can go to the after party. Poof, waiting for